Hello, you are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Moment on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Okwan. Today's section, I quickly run with you the development of the heart. My friends, you know that the heart is the engine of the cardiovascular system. So the broader picture is for us to look at the development of the cardiovascular system, but we are beginning with that of the heart. So in future, in our later sections, we'll be looking at the development of the various arteries, the development of the venous system as well. Okay, and so my friends, at the end of this section, we should be able to tell where this heart is coming from. Yes, one thing is that it starts development around the third week of intrauterine life, precisely around day 18, day 19 post-fertilization. Okay, so that is when it's going to start. And my friends, initially it's going to start as two strands of cardiogenic cause. Okay, so that's how it's going to start. And my friends, it's going to take place in what we call the cardiogenic area, cranial aspect of the embryo. That is where it's going to start. My friends, I'm not interested in so many things, but the main thing that I will put most of my energy on is for me to tell you, that the heart, the chambers of the heart, internal, what is happening over there by way of course, the atria and of course the ventricles, because we know that the atria will have, smooth posterior part and then of course rough anterior part, with the ventricles having of course rough inflowing part and then smooth outflowing part. That is the main things that I'll be looking at. But I won't leave you behind, because I will also explain to you, where these cardiac muscles are coming from, where the epicardium is coming from, and then more importantly, I'll look at, of course, the pericardium. So my friends, at the end of this section, we should be able to tell a whole story behind the development of the heart. And so, without much ado, let's set the ball rolling. So there we are, my friends. Just to begin with, this is the embryo having a tapering caudal end and of course a broader, cranial end. And my friends, one thing, I've done all these things already, gastrulation in the third week of intrauterine life. I've explained all these things. But my friends, this time around, what I'm interested in is to show you that, this is the opening of the mouth in future. That's the procaudal plate, which becomes the future opening of the mouth. Okay, of course, the buccopharyngeal membrane. Now, what I'm interested in is that cranial to this buccopharyngeal membrane, yes, we find what we call the cardiogenic area. So, my friends, initially, where the heart is going to develop from, yes, it is superior, or it is cranial to, of course, the opening of your mouth. Isn't that surprising? So that is, one thing I want you to know. And my friends, even cranial to this cardiogenic area, cranial to it, I'll have an area which has undifferentiated lateral plate mesoderm. Now, my friends, one important thing that I want you to know is that if you talk about the heart and we say that the heart, where is it going to develop from? It's going to develop from what we call the lateral plate mesoderm. And precisely which layer of the lateral plate mesoderm are we talking about? Is the splanchnic pleuric lateral plate mesoderm. Let me explain this one to you. If I take a cross section through this embryo, now what I see is that, yes, just to orient you a bit, now over here, this is the ectoderm. And of course, this is the endoderm, which is in relation with the yolk sac. Okay, now what I see is that then intermediate here we are going to have what we call the mesoderm. And form from what we call the axial mesoderm, I see this guy over here, which is of course the notochord. And the notochord serving as an axis, just lateral on either side of this, notochord, I see, some structures which are also differentiations, okay, coming from, of course, the mesoderm. And lateral to this notochord, I see what we call paraxial mesoderm. And then even lateral to this paraxial mesoderm, I see what we call the intermediate mesoderm. Now, something that we've discussed already, that this intermediate mesoderm, yes, will give rise to, of course, the genital as well as, of course, the urinary, systems. Yes, if you've not watched that video, please get that video link and watch it. But more importantly, the one we are looking at today, okay, is this guy which is lateral to this intermediate mesoderm. This guy over here, which are differentiated into two already, okay, is what we call the lateral plate mesoderm. Lateral plate mesoderm. My friends, this lateral plate mesoderm, with the help of a cavity, a coelom, which is formed within it, okay, that coelom, okay, is what we call intraembryonic coelom. My friends, this intraembryonic coelom in future will give rise to all those cavities that we have in the ventral, body wall, okay. That is what we see. For instance, if I talk about the pleural cavity, yes, it's coming from this, intraembryonic coelom. Yes, if you talk about the peritoneal cavity, to be coming from this intraembryonic coelom, and more important, the one we are interested in talking about today, the pericardial cavity, will also be coming from what we call the will be coming from this intraembryonic coelom. Okay, that is one thing I want you to know. But my friends, what I'm trying to show you is that this heart, okay, there will be the cranial end of this, splanchnopleural lateral plate mesoderm, okay, is what we call the cardiogenic area, and that side, that is where the heart is going to develop from. But I'm even saying that even cranial, okay, to this cardiogenic area, we have an area where, of course, this lateral plate mesoderm is not differentiated. There's no cavity formed within it, and that side, yes, is what we call septum transversum. That is the undifferentiated lateral plate mesoderm. My friends, get to know that. Now, why are we saying that this one is called the splanchnopleural? Now, anything splanchnic is in relation to the viscera, because we are having the yolk sac, yes, around where we have the endoderm, yes, then it means that this area becomes the visceral, mesoderm. And visceral, what do I mean? Is the same as the splanchnopleural lateral plate mesoderm we are talking about. And this guy over here is in relation, okay, with, of course, the ectoderm. And we know that this ectoderm is that one which is, yes, in relation to the body wall, yes, and that's why, yes, we will call it the parietal layer, okay, or somatopleural lateral plate mesoderm. And so one thing I want to also show you over here, explain to you, is that if I look at the pericardium, okay, that area, okay, which I said is cranial to this cardiogenic area, which we are calling it septum transversum. Yes, we have the fate of this septum transversum giving rise to, of course, liver stroma. I'll explain that one to you. Giving rise to, of course, the ventral mesogastrum. Yes, giving rise to, of course, the central tendon of the diaphragm. And more importantly, if you look at the in humans, we are going to have what we call the fibrous pericardium. My friends, this fibrous pericardium will also be coming from, of course, the septum transversum. But having seen the fibrous pericardium, then we also have the serous pericardium. Now, the serous pericardium is having two layers. One of them is called the parietal layer of the serous pericardium. My friends, that parietal layer of serous pericardium will be coming from, of course, this somatopleural or the parietal layer of what we call the lateral plate mesoderm. As simple like that. Yes, and of course, you know that the one which also forms part of what we call the epicardium, together with, of course, the epicardial fat, yes, is this guy over here, which of course we call the splanchnopleural lateral plate mesoderm. That one will form, yes, will give rise to, of course, the visceral layer of what we call serous pericardium. So my friends, you have to understand these kind of dynamics that we are explaining to you. Then the pericardial cavity, which is formed between, of course, the parietal layer and the serous layer of the visceral pericardium, yes, is coming from, of course, this intraembryonic coelom. Okay, so I hope you understand this one up to this point. My friends, I explained to you that if the fibrous pericardium, yes, is going to give rise to, of course, you talk about, of course, the central tendon of the diaphragm. I'm not interested in those ones, but I'm talking about the fibrous pericardium. That fibrous pericardium is coming from this guy over here, which is, of course, undifferentiated lateral plate mesoderm, and that is what we call the septum transversum. I told that it also give rise to some portion, yes, liver stroma, the connective tissue of the liver will also be coming from it. Then, of course, because it's in relation to the gut tube, it forms, it's important in, of course, giving rise to, of course, the ventral mesogastrum. We explain that one to you later. But for me to also explain to you the visceral and parietal layers of the serous pericardium, assuming this pericardium is like, this balloon over here, and then, of course, a fist is pushed through it, then what will happen is that that portion, assuming this fist is, of course, the heart, okay, which are developed in the cardiogenic area, then what will happen is that that portion, okay, of the serous pericardium, which is intimately attached to this heart over here, becomes the visceral layer of the serous pericardium, which I told you that it will be coming from, of course, the splanchnopleural lateral plate mesoderm, just like the heart will be coming from the splanchnopleural lateral plate mesoderm. Then, of course, we said that, yes, this one of the serous pericardium is what we call the parietal layer, which lines the wall, and that is why that one will be coming from the somatopleuric lateral plate mesoderm. With of course that coelom which is formed between them, okay, which is called the intraembryonic coelom, will give rise to the pericardial cavity. Okay, so that is, generally what we have to know about these things. But my friends, in the wall of the heart, for the heart to be very myogenic, for the heart to be able to pump blood, yes, to all those important areas, then what will happen is that we need cardiac muscles, which of course histologically we looked at these things. Please get the videos and then watch them. And my friends, one important thing is that this, cardiac muscles will also be coming from, of course, the splanchnopluric. Just like, of course, if I have, we have skeletal muscles to the body wall, so it means that one will be somatic in nature. Then this one, because visceral, just like smooth muscle, will be coming from, of course, the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm. But my friends, precisely to be coming from what we call the myoepicardial mantle, and it is that that myoepicardial mantle of this lateral splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm, which will also give rise to the, of course, the visceral layer of the serous pericardium. Of course, that is of course the epicardium. Yes, that is one thing I want you to know. Okay. So how did we get here, my friends? How did we get here? And what we want to know is that in the 3rd week of intrauterine life, my friend, precisely around day 18, day 19, post-fertilization, yes, we see that this area which is highlighted with the star over here, yes, in the cephalic region of the embryo, I see this guy over here which is showing me the cardiogenic area. Now it is within this cardiogenic area that around getting to day 20, what will happen is that there will be some tubes which will be formed over here, and my friends, those tubes will be called endocardial tubes. My friends, look at this. We are looking at the anything cardium has to do with the heart, so we see 2 tubes which will be formed. Okay, and those tubes, yes, will be called what you call endocardial tubes. But my friends, initially they were strands which were not having any cavities in them, and those ones we call them cardiogenic cores. So initially they were cores, and then eventually, yes, tubes, there was that kind of canalization, okay, taking place within them, okay, so that blood, okay, could flow through them. So initially there was no blood flowing through them because they were just some kind of cores without any lumina in them. Then eventually, yes, that lumen was created in them, and these tubes, these cores will now be called endocardial tubes, initially called cardiogenic cores. Okay, so that is one thing that I want you to know, endocardial tubes. My friends, as development goes on, yes, for instance, day 21, then what will happen is that these tubes begin to fuse together. Okay, they begin to fuse, okay, together. But my friends, the fusion, more of it, when they fuse together, then what will happen is that if you look at this color code that we have over here, this blue colored area becomes the caudal region. And my friends, the caudal region of this heart tube, okay, this primitive heart tube, becomes of course the venous end. And then the opposite aspect, which of course you can see it is a bit bright red going there, that becomes of course the arterial end of the heart tube. Okay, eventually of course there will be that kind of folding which will be taking place. Okay, so let me just go on and show you something. Now, if I've enlarged those ones which were over there, now what I see is that this heart tube, okay, will begin to fold on itself. So the folding will take place such that, for instance, the venous end, okay, will begin to fold, go backwards a bit. Can you see that it is going backwards a bit? Okay, for of course the arterial end to become a bit ventral. Okay, so around the somewhere day 35, that complete folding would have taken place. Okay, so that is an important thing that I want you to know. So have you seen this? Now, what is this heart tube all about? Now, this heart tube is having 3 main areas which we'll be looking at. And what are these 3 main areas? Or let me say 4 main areas. Now, I'll be having the venous end, I'll be having the arterial end, then I'll be having what we call the primitive atrium, and then of course primitive ventricle. So if I'm going from caudal to cranial, then what do I have? The venous end, okay, will be called sinus venosus. My friends, the venous end is known as sinus venosus, which will be having a body and it will be having 2 horns. Now, I said that there will be 2 endocardial heart tubes, okay, which will be fusing. Now during the fusion, what will happen is that usually the caudal end, which I have the venous end, they tend not to fuse completely, but usually at the cranial end there's that kind of complete fusion. So please get to understand this principle. So the caudal end, okay, which of course is the venous end, okay, is called the sinus venosus. My friends, this sinus venosus will have a body and it will have two conva, two horns, yes, right, and of course left horns. Okay, so that is one thing I want you to know. Just for now, just know that. And then I'll have the primitive atrium. Okay, following it, I'm going from caudal to cranial. Then I'll have primitive ventricle. Then eventually I'll have what we call the bulbous cordis. Okay, so that is how it's going to be like. So I have sinus venosus from caudal end, I'm going cranial. I'll go to primitive atrium, primitive ventricle. Then I'll go to bulbous cordis. Okay, so that is one thing that we have to see. We need to know about the fate of all these guys over here. Now my friends, what do I see? I see that this right, both for the right horn and left horns of, this sinus venosus, what I see is that there will be some veins which will be entering it, and these are primitive veins. I will explain all those ones, the fate of them to you in our next videos that we'll be doing. Now my friends, from lateral to medial, I have what we call common cardinal veins. Guys, common cardinal veins, because they are coming from the fusion of anterior and posterior cardiac veins. We explained that one to you. Okay, so we have the common cardinal veins, yes, both left and right. And then as I go medial, then I see this vein, which of course we call the umbilical vein. Yes, the umbilical vein, that is what we will be seeing. We will be seeing all these fate, because at the end of the day, even this right umbilical vein, yes, will have to become obliterated. Okay, then of course I come medial, the medial-most vein, I'll have what we call the vitelline vein. We will be seeing now all these guys over here in future. Then one thing that I want you to know is that this left horn of sinus venosus, for instance, yes, may become obliterated. Okay, and then of course its remnant, okay, will give rise to what we call the coronary sinus. Okay, we know that the coronary sinus will be opening in the right atrium of the heart, just like superior and inferior vena cava will be opening over there. Okay, so that is one thing we see. Now my friends, if you look at the atria, okay, one thing that I told you is that the atria will be having smooth smooth posterior part, and it will be having rough anterior part. Now my friends, if I look at the right atrium, okay, right atrium, the smooth posterior part, okay, will be coming from this body over here, the body of the sinus venosus. Please get to know that the right atrium, its smooth posterior part will be coming from the body of the sinus venosus. Yes, it's very close to this atrium, so it will be absorbed over there. I told you that this guy over here, the venous part, will be going to the posterior aspect, and that is how it will be absorbed, okay, to form part of the posterior wall of the right atrium of the heart. Please get to know that. Now my friends, how about the left atrium? The left atrium, the smooth posterior part, will be from the absorption of the pulmonary veins. Now we know that about 4 pulmonary veins will be opening at the posterior wall of the left atrium, and that is how come they will be absorbed, because we know that in the the endothelium of blood vessels, you see that they have that kind of smooth luminal margin, and that's how they will be absorbed over there. And once they get absorbed over there, then they will give rise to the smooth posterior part of the left atrium of the heart. Please get to understand this. Now, having talked about the smooth posterior part, now how about the rough anterior portions of both the right and left atrium? That's a common origin. Yes, they will be coming from, of course, this guy over here. That's the primitive atrium. So my friends, if someone asks you that where will the rough posterior parts, okay, of both the right and left atria, okay, originating from, my friends, the answer is simple. They will be coming from the primitive atrium. But my friend, there's a catch. You know that on the on the sides of these what do you call it, atria, both left and right atria, we have auricles. Now my friends, auricles are also derived from this primitive atrium. Please get to understand this. Auricles are also derived from this primitive atrium, and that is why auricles, the entire wall of the auricle, yes, you'll be seeing that there's no smooth aspect. Everything is rough. Okay, so get to know that for the auricles, you don't have smooth or rough part. Everything is rough. Okay, so that is one thing that you have to know. my friend, there will be a canal. Yes, so I'm done with the atria. So there will be a canal, that's the atrioventricular canal, that will be connecting the primitive atrium to the primitive ventricle. And my friends, if I get to this guy over here, which is of course the primitive ventricle, now I told you that for the ventricles, rather, we have what you call, rough inflowing part and then smooth outflowing part. The outflowing should be smooth enough, okay, so that there's little turbulence in the blood flow as it goes out, okay, of the heart. So it means that this guy over here, which is the primitive ventricle, yes, it will be giving rise to what we call the rough, okay, inflowing part of the left ventricle. Please get to know that it will be giving rise to what we call the rough inflowing part of the left ventricle. And of course, we know that that area is rich in what we call, trabeculae cardi, okay, and that is why the rough inflowing part can also be called the trabeculated part of the left ventricle. Will be coming from this primitive ventricle. Now, my friends, the principle is simple. I told you that from the ventricle, primitive ventricle, we have what we call the bulbous cordis. Now, my friends, this bulbous cordis is also differentiated into three parts. And what are these three parts? We have the proximal 1/3 of the bulbous cordis. I have the middle 1/3 of the bulbous cordis, which is also known as the conus. Please get to know that the proximal 1/3 of the bulbous cordis is not given any special name, but of course, the middle 1/3 of the bulbous cordis is called conus. Okay, something which will give rise to smooth portions. And then we have what we call the distal 1/3 of the bulbous cordis, which is also known as the truncus arteriosus. That becomes the arterial end of what we call the bulbous cordis. Now, if I'm moving from caudal to cranial, once I've moved away from this primitive ventricle, which will be giving rise to, of course, the rough inflowing part of the trabeculated part of the left ventricle, then I go to the next one, the one where is just next to it, will give me the trabeculated or the rough inflowing part of what we call the right ventricle. Please get to know that. Okay, so that's what is going to happen. Now, having seen the rough part, inflowing part, then how about the smooth portions? The smooth portions will have a common, source of origin, and that will be coming from the conus. Please get to know that. It will be coming from the conus. Okay, so please look at the similarities, that kind of similarities or that kind of differentiations. Okay, compare how, the ventricles, okay, are different or similar to that of the atria. Now, I told you that if it's the primitive atrium, okay, over here, that one will be giving rise to, of course, this portion of the will be giving rise to the rough, okay, portions, rough anterior portions of both the right and left atria. Okay, that is what we see. That's a common origin, but the smooth portions are different. The smooth portions for the right atrium will be coming from the body of the sinus venosus, where of course the smooth portions of the left atrium will be coming from absorption of the four pulmonary veins which open at the posterior wall of the left atrium. That's what we see. Now, for the ventricle, what am I saying? The primitive ventricle will be giving rise to the left ventricle. By which point of the left ventricle? It is the trabeculated part, which is the rough inflowing part of the left ventricle. Okay, and then of course the next one, which is the proximal 1/3 of bulbous cordis, will giving rise to what we call the trabeculated part of what we call the right ventricle. So the common source will be coming from, which is the smooth outflowing part, that's the conus, will be coming from, of course, the conus. So that's what we see. Now, how about the most cranial portion of this heart tube of the bulbous cordis? Okay, is what we call the truncus arteriosus. Yes, you know that most arteries we call them trunk. Yes, so trunk of arteries, so truncus arteriosus. And my friends, that guy here will be that kind of septum which will be formed. I'll be taking through the intra-atrial and then interventricular septa in later sections. But my friends, they will give this guy with the truncus arteriosus will differentiate to give rise to what we call the ascending aorta, as well as, of course, the pulmonary trunk. Okay, so that will be the fate of the various portions of the heart tube from caudal to cranial. Okay, so that is what we are going to see. So what have you seen, my friends? If you've seen the interior aspect of the wall of the atria, that's what we are going to see. You see that this for the right atrium. If I cut through this one, what do I see? I see that this area is of course the smooth posterior part, okay, which of course we said is coming from the body of the sinus venosus. Okay, so that's what we see, which of course in the adults we call sinus veranum. So the smooth posterior part in the adult we rather call it sinus veranum, but where it is coming from, where is it coming from? Embryonically, it's coming from the sinus, the body of the sinus venosus. Okay, so that is what we see. Then what do I see? I also see that this guy over here, which is the rough, anterior part, which is having these musculi pectinati, the pectinate muscles lying over there. Okay, that one, okay, becomes, of course, the rough anterior portion. And the rough anterior portion, my friends, it is coming from, of course, the primitive atrium. Okay, just like that we find for the left, atrium. And of course, this for the right atrium, then the smooth posterior part and then the rough anterior part, they are separated internally by this what we call the crista terminalis. We know that at the posterior aspect it is demarcated by what we call the sulcus terminalis. Okay, so that is what we see. Okay, so similarly, that is what we are going to see over here. So I told you that rather the smooth posterior part that we find with the left atrium, most of it, okay, is coming from absorption of these pulmonary veins, the 4 pulmonary veins we're talking about. Then if you look at the auricles, both left and right auricle, now you can see that if this one is cut, now this one is cut, you see that everything about the walls of the auricles will be rough in nature. So that is, one thing that we see. Okay, now I told you that opening of what you call the coronary sinus. Okay, this guy over here, I told you it will be coming from, of course, the regression of what you call the left horn of what you call the sinus venosus. Okay, to be opening over here. I told that this smooth posterior part, that's where the vessels, great vessels, also be opening by way of the inferior vena cava and of course the superior vena cava. Okay, opening in the posterior wall of the right atrium of the heart. And what else? For the ventricles too, I told you that you'll be having the rough inflowing part, that is the trabeculated part, because we're having all these guys over here, the trabeculae carni, okay, all over here. Okay, and I told you that for the left ventricle, it will be coming from what we call the primitive ventricle. Then for the right ventricle, the rough inflowing part will be coming from the proximal 1/3 of the bulbous cordis. Okay, so that is what we saw. But of course, the smooth outflowing part, this one is not really showing us for the left, but for this guy over here, the right ventricle, you can clearly see the smooth outflowing part, which of course I told you that it will be coming from the conus. That is of course what we call the infundibulum. Then for the left ventricle, because we're opening into the aorta, we call the aortic vestibule. So my friends, the smooth outflowing part of what we call the right ventricle, we are calling it infundibulum. Then that of the left ventricle, we are calling it aortic vestibule. Both are coming from, of course, the conus, okay, the middle 1/3 of the bulbous cordis. So please get to understand these things. I'm very grateful for your time this evening. I hope you found this meeting helpful. Yes, we'll be looking at all the other things, like by way of, for instance, the arterial system and the venous system, which will be coming from, of course, all those guys. So please, I hope you'll be able to make a date with me in our next sessions as we deal with all these things. Have a good night, all of you, and may the good Lord richly bless you. Amen.